I never imagined the child I raised with shaking hands and sleepless nights would one day steal from me. The phone notification blinked once, then again, then wouldn't stop. Thousands gone. My savings, emptied in minutes. All because I said one word to my son. No? And that single refusal exposed a betrayal that shattered my idea of family forever. I'm a single mother. I worked 3 jobs, skipped meals, and buried my pride so my son could grow up with dignity. I believed love meant sacrifice, and I never counted the cost. But when my son demanded $18,000 for his wife's family party, I didn't realize I was standing at the edge of a truth that would break my heart and redefine my strength. This is not just a story about money. It's about entitlement, boundaries, and the painful moment a parent realizes love alone is no longer enough. That evening is still carved into my memory with painful clarity. I remember the way the room felt unusually quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your chest before something heavy lands. My phone rang, and when I saw my son's name on the screen, I smiled out of habit. No matter how old he got, a part of me still saw the little boy who used to wait by the door for me to come home from work. I answered with warmth, already ready to listen, already prepared to help in whatever way a mother could. His voice was different that day. It wasn't rushed or casual. It carried a firmness that immediately made my stomach tighten. After a few formal words, he got straight to the point. He told me his wife's family was planning a grand party, something that had to be perfect because relatives were coming from far away. He talked about expectations, reputation, and how important it was to make a strong impression. I listened quietly, nodding even though he couldn't see me, because listening had always been my role. Then he said the number, almost casually, as if he were asking for grocery money instead of the sum that represented years of my life. $18,000. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My mind raced, trying to process what he had just said. That amount wasn't sitting idle in some extra account. It was my savings, my security, the money I had put aside after years of struggle so I wouldn't become a burden in old age. Every dollar had a story behind it. Late nights, aching feet, skipped meals, and moments when I chose his needs over my own. I swallowed hard and asked him to repeat the amount, hoping I had heard it wrong. He repeated it, confidently, without hesitation. I tried to explain gently. I told him that I had already helped with the wedding, that I had contributed to setting up their home, that my finances were not what they used to be. I reminded him that I was no longer young, that my health was unpredictable, and that this money was all I had to fall back on. As I spoke, I could hear my voice shaking, not because I didn't want to help, but because I was scared. Scared of losing everything I had worked so hard to protect. Instead of understanding, his tone shifted. He sounded irritated, almost offended. He said this wasn't about luxury, it was about respect. He said his wife's family expected a certain standard, and that refusing would embarrass him. Each word felt like a stone thrown directly at my heart. I realized he wasn't asking anymore. He was expecting compliance. To him, my savings were not my safety. They were simply a resource he could access. As he continued, memories flooded my mind. I remembered nights when I stayed awake worrying about school fees. I remembered selling my jewelry to pay for his education. I remembered telling myself that one day, when he was settled, I would finally rest. I had believed that all those sacrifices were investments in love, that they would come back to me as respect and gratitude. But in that moment, listening to his entitlement, I felt something crack inside me. I took a deep breath and said the word I had rarely ever said to him. No. I told him I couldn't give him that money. I explained again, slowly, carefully, hoping he would hear the fear behind my refusal. I thought he might pause, reflect, maybe even apologize for asking. Instead, there was a long silence on the other end of the line, the kind that feels colder than shouting. When he finally spoke, his voice was sharp. He accused me of choosing myself over his happiness. He reminded me of everything he had done as a son, as if love were a transaction that now needed repayment. He said other mothers would never hesitate, that I was being selfish, that I didn't care about his marriage or his reputation. Each accusation cut deeper than the last. I wanted to scream that I had given him my entire life, but the word stayed trapped in my throat. Then he said something that left me trembling. He told me that whether I helped or not, the party would happen. He said he would find a way because failure was not an option. There was a finality in his tone, a distance that felt unfamiliar and frightening. Before I could respond, the call ended. I stayed at my phone, my hands cold, my heart pounding as if it already sensed what was coming. I sat there for a long time after that call, replaying every word in my head. I questioned myself, wondering if I had been too harsh, too afraid, too protective of what little I had left. Guilt crept in, as it always does for mothers. I almost convinced myself to call him back and say yes, just to restore peace. But something deep inside whispered that this was a line I could not cross without losing myself completely. That night, sleep never came. I lay awake thinking about how love had slowly turned into obligation, how my role as a mother had shifted from being cherished to being expected to endlessly give. I didn't yet know that this demand was only the beginning, that my refusal had triggered a betrayal far greater than harsh words. But even then, in the quiet darkness, I felt the weight of a truth settling in. Sometimes the people you sacrifice the most for are the ones who forget the cost entirely. The word no stayed heavy in my chest long after I said it. I had spoken it calmly, without anger, but it felt as though I had committed a crime. For years, I had trained myself to say yes before anyone even finished asking. Yes to extra expenses. Yes to emotional burdens. Yes to staying quiet when I was tired or hurt. Saying no to my own son felt unnatural, almost cruel, even though logic told me it was necessary. That night, I kept replaying the conversation in my mind, searching for a gentler way I could have refused, a softer tone that might have spared his feelings without destroying my own. The next day, he called again. This time, his voice was colder, distant, stripped of the warmth that once lived there. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't ask if I had slept. He went straight back to the party, repeating details as if overwhelming me would weaken my resolve. He talked about the hall, the decorations, the number of guests, and how everything had already been discussed with his wife's family. It sounded less like a plan and more like a verdict that had already been decided without me. I tried once more to explain. I told him about my monthly expenses, about medical bills I was trying to prepare for, about the fear of being left with nothing if something went wrong. I reminded him that I was alone, that there was no one else to catch me if I fell. My voice cracked as I spoke, but I hoped that vulnerability would reach him, that it would awaken the compassion I believed still existed in his heart. Instead, he sighed, loudly and impatiently, as if I were being deliberately difficult. He said I was exaggerating, that money comes and goes, that I was worrying too much. He told me I should be proud to help, that this was my chance to show his wife's family what kind of mother I was. Those words stung more than anything else. My worth as a mother, reduced to a bank transfer. My love measured by how much I was willing to lose. As the conversation continued, his frustration turned into subtle manipulation. He reminded me of how much he loved me, how he always defended me, how he was all I had. Then, almost in the same breath, he warned me of the consequences of refusing. He said his wife was already upset. He said her family was questioning my intentions. He said people would talk. The fear of shame, something I had spent my whole life trying to avoid, wrapped itself around me like a tightening rope. When I repeated my refusal, more firmly this time, his tone changed again. The warmth disappeared completely, replaced by resentment. He accused me of being selfish, of thinking only about my own comfort. He asked me what kind of mother chooses a savings over her son's happiness. Each question felt like a blade, carefully aimed at the places he knew were already wounded. I wanted to shout that I had never chosen myself before, not once, but I was too exhausted to fight. After the call ended, I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the worn surface where I had once helped him with homework. I remembered his small hands clutching pencils, his laughter filling the room. I wondered when that child had learned to see me not as a person, but as a resource. The realization made my chest ache with a grief I couldn't yet name. It wasn't just disappointment. It was a mourning of a relationship I thought was unbreakable. Days passed, and the tension hung in the air like an approaching storm. He didn't visit. He didn't call to check on me. When he did message, it was always about the same thing, always carrying the same pressure. Each notification made my heart race, my body bracing for another round of guilt and accusations. I began to doubt myself again. Maybe I was being too rigid. Maybe I should sacrifice just a little more. After all, that's what mothers do, isn't it? But late at night, when the house was silent, reality spoke louder. I would look at my bank statements, at the careful planning that had taken years, and I felt fear claw at my chest. I imagined myself sick, unable to work, with nothing left. I imagined asking others for help and being turned away. The thought terrified me more than my son's anger ever could. For the first time, I acknowledged a truth I had avoided for years. Loving someone did not mean destroying yourself for them. One evening, he came over unannounced. The air between us was thick with unresolved woes. He sat across from me, his expression hard, his patience thin. He told me again how important the party was, how everyone was counting on him, how I was the only obstacle standing in the way. I looked at him and barely recognized the man in front of me. His eyes no longer searched mine for understanding. They searched for compliance. When I said no once more, clearly and without apology, something in him snapped. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He said he couldn't believe I was doing this to him. He said I was ruining his life. His words echoed through the room, each one heavier than the last. I felt tears burn in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Crying had never changed anything before. As he stormed out, he turned back and said something that sent a chill through me. He said I would regret this decision. The door slammed shut behind him, leaving me alone in the silence. I sat there, shaking, my heart pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. I didn't know what he meant by regret, but fear settled deep in my bones. That night, I checked the drawer where I kept my wallet, out of instinct more than logic. My card was still there, exactly where it should be. I tried to calm myself, telling myself I was overreacting. Still, our knees followed me to bed, whispering that something was wrong. I clutched my blanket tightly, feeling more vulnerable than I ever had before. The refusal had cost me more than peace. It had exposed a dangerous imbalance in our relationship. I had crossed an invisible line, one that separated unconditional giving from self-preservation. I didn't yet know the full price I would pay for that choice, but deep down, I sensed that my no had ignited something dark. And as sleep finally overtook me, I carried with me a growing realization that the hardest battles are not fought with strangers, but with the people who know exactly where to hurt you. The morning it happened began like any other, deceptively ordinary, as if life itself was trying to soften the blow that was coming. Sunlight slipped through the curtains, and for a brief moment, I allowed myself to believe that the storm had passed, that maybe my son's anger would cool and things would return to some version of normal. I made tea, moved slowly around the kitchen, and tried to steady my thoughts. But before I even took my first sip, my phone vibrated on the table. One notification appeared, then another, then another. The sound kept repeating, sharp and relentless, cutting through the quiet of the house. I frowned, confused, and reached for the phone. As soon as I unlocked it, my heart began to pound so violently I thought I might collapse. Bank alerts filled the screen, one after another, withdrawals and transactions, stacking up faster than my mind could process them. Large amounts, exact amounts, amounts I knew by heart because they were pieces of my life. My hands started to shake. I stared at the numbers, hoping my eyes were lying to me, hoping this was some terrible mistake or system error. I refreshed the app, holding my breath. The balance updated. It dropped, then it dropped again. And then there was nothing left. Zero. My savings, my security, my future, gone in a matter of minutes. A strange numbness washed over me before the panic hit. My ears rang, and the room seemed to tilt. I sat down heavily, gripping the edge of the chair to keep myself upright. I whispered my son's name without meaning to, as if saying it out loud might make sense of what I was seeing. I didn't want to believe it. I couldn't believe it. Surely not him. Surely no child could do this to their own mother. I called the bank with trembling fingers, barely able to speak when the representative answered. As they confirmed the transactions, reading out merchant names related to event planning, luxury services, and party arrangements, the truth slowly, cruelly revealed itself. This wasn't fraud by a stranger. This wasn't a stolen card by chance. This was deliberate, organized, planned. Every charge pointed to one thing: the very party he had demanded money for. My chest tightened until it hurt to breathe. Memories flooded my mind all at once, crashing into each other. His voice the night before, telling me I would regret my decision. The way he had stormed out. The confidence with which he said the party would happen with or without me. I felt sick as the realization settled in. He hadn't just ignored my no. He had punished it. I hung up the phone and stared at the wall, my vision blurred with tears I didn't remember inviting. I felt violated in a way that went far beyond money. This wasn't just theft. It was betrayal at its deepest level. The card he used wasn't just plastic. It was trust. It was access I had given him because I never imagined I would need protection from my own child. I called him. Straight to voicemail. I called again. No answer. Each unanswered call made the pain sharper, more unbearable. When he finally picked up, his voice was calm, almost casual, as if nothing had happened. I asked him directly, my voice barely holding together. He didn't deny it. He said he needed the money and that I would understand eventually. He said I was overreacting. He said family doesn't say no to family. Something broke inside me at that moment. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, in a way that felt permanent. I realized that the son I was speaking to did not see me as a mother in pain. He saw me as an obstacle he had successfully removed. My tears meant nothing to him. My fear meant nothing. My future meant nothing. After the call ended, I sat alone for hours, replaying my life in fragments. Every sacrifice, every time I put him first, every moment I told myself that a mother's duty was to endure silently. I felt foolish for believing love alone could protect me. I felt ashamed for not setting boundaries sooner. But beneath the shame and the grief, something else began to stir. Anger, not the explosive kind, but a steady, grounding force that refused to let me disappear. Reporting the theft was one of the hardest decisions I have ever made. My hands shook as I filled out the forms, as if my body was fighting against years of conditioning that told me to protect my child at all costs. But this time, I chose to protect myself. Not because I stopped loving him, but because loving him had nearly destroyed me. That day marked the end of the mother I used to be, the one who believed endless sacrifice was proof of love. In her place stood someone wounded but awake, someone who finally understood that boundaries are not cruelty, and accountability is not betrayal. As night fell and the house grew quiet again, I sat with the pain, letting it exist without trying to justify it away. I had lost my savings. Yes, but I had gained a truth I could no longer ignore. The deepest wounds are often inflicted by those who know exactly how much you can endure and choose to test it anyway. Some lessons arrive gently. Others arrive by breaking your heart first. I lost my savings, but I found my voice. I lost my silence, but I reclaimed my self-respect. And if this story teaches anything, it's this. Asterisk, asterisk, love should never cost you your dignity, your safety, or your future. Asterisk, asterisk.